and thanks for joining tonight's TI Technology webinar hosted by Texas Instruments. Where tonight we're going to help you with some summer planning, focusing on ACT test prep for the upcoming school year. My name is Mike Houston, and I'm the moderator for this event. I teach algebra and calculus near Pittsburgh, where I use TI technology to make tough-to-teach, tough-to-learn concepts accessible to all my students. Tonight I'm really excited to be joined by our two panelists, Tom Reardon and Jeff McCullough. Tom taught at Fitch High School in Austintown, Ohio for 35 years and has served as an adjunct professor at Youngstown State University for the last 34 years. As a T-Cube National Instructor, Tom has worked on the development of the TI SmartView emulator software, TI-Nspire CX, and TI-Nspire Navigator. Currently, Tom works for TI in product strategy and development. Tom, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Sure. Glad to be here.
And Jeff co-founded the TI-Nspire Super User Group with Bryson Perry. He's currently teaching Algebra 2 at St. Mary's Episcopal School in Memphis, Tennessee. In 2009, Jeff received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching, and he has authored the second edition of the TI-Nspire for Dummies, as well as the second edition for the TI-84 for Dummies. Jeff, so great to have you with us tonight.
Hey, good to be here.
We're expecting a large crowd, so your audio is muted. Feel free at any time to send any questions to Tom or Jeff using the Q&A window on the right side of your screen. We'll also be using the chat window to send general messages. As a reminder, the session is being recorded, and we'll provide a link to the event certificate of attendance at the conclusion of the webinar. We hope you don't have any audio issues tonight, but in the event that you do, try selecting Communicate from the very top of the WebEx menu and choose Audio Broadcast. At this point, Jeff is going to discuss our agenda.
Well, it's good to be here. This is the last webinar of the spring, and we're going to talk about ACT strategies. We're also going to start with big picture. What can we do over the summer, and then kind of narrow it down to actually using TI-84 and TI-Nspire technology, and how that can help on the ACT. And this is kind of exciting. I didn't realize this, but there's actually a webinar drawing at the end. So if you stick with us, there's a drawing for a free summer workshop here. So that's a great prize, actually, I think.
Thanks so much, Jeff. And Tom is going to discuss our expected outcomes.
So it doesn't look like we have many expected outcomes, but believe me, there are several. We are going to do lessons learned from past ACT exams. We got a lot of information from that. Jeff and I have been working on this for the last 2 years, and really have a lot of experience with ACT, and now we've been working on SAT. We'll even refer to that a little bit. And we're going to explore how technology can improve student success on the ACT exam, not just by taking it with the exam, but also how you can prepare your students using the graphing calculator.
Thanks so much, Tom. Jeff, you should have control. Feel free to share your screen.
Okay. Great. So let's talk about summer planning and the ACT test. Tom and I have been reading lots of articles about ACT and SAT prep, and this one really caught our eye when we saw this stat. The number of perfect ACT scores is 6 times higher today than it was 8 years ago. But there actually hasn't been much change in average test scores for the ACT. Tom, I call this the test prep effect. Did you take the ACT in high school? Did they have the ACT in high school, Tom, when you went to school?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. We just had it was just called A back then because we didn't have like 26 letters in the alphabet yet. But and when we took it, there was no test prep. There was just take it, and you took it once. There was no such thing as taking it again. Right.
And so I think what I've seen in the classroom in the last 10 years, I have seen a change in that not just our school, but I'd say most schools are including test prep as part of the curriculum. You know, somehow it's woven in there, or there's some extra offerings after school, before school. Lots of schools are doing more test prep. And so there's this thing that now it's leading to more perfect scores. In other words, if you actually prep for this test, you might be able to master it. Is that what you kind of get from this stat, Tom?
Yeah, for sure. And it looks like the students at the higher up level are benefiting a lot more than the other students. They must be doing a lot more test prep, I think.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So this is definitely affecting the very at the scores at the top for sure. But this is something I think that affects everyone, which is if you put in hours of test prep, if you put in your daily diligence and do some test prep, that College Board did a study and they found out it led to a 115-point increase in gain in SAT scores, and that can be 4 or 5 points on the ACT. 115
Wow.
points is significant there. And so, I think, to me, like just motivating our students this time of year, they're about to go off to the summer, and say, like, I talk to my students. I teach at St. Mary's, a very high-end, academic school. But I think one of the secrets to my students is they're goal setters. And I think any student can be a goal setter. So in other words, I tell them, okay, you make your own goal for this. It might be this summer you say, I want to work 20 hours over the whole summer and do test prep for 20 hours so that my score can be raised. But some of my students will say, I want to work 20 hours a week towards test prep. Think about that. What would happen if you put in 40 hours of test prep? Would you gain 200 points potentially? Or I'm sure there's got to be a max there. But I do think that the more hours you put towards test prep, the better your score is going to look. Do you agree with that, Tom, in general?
Oh,
it's a positive
absolutely.
relationship.
It has to be a good test prep. It can't just be going through the motions and correcting answers, things like that.
Yeah, I agree. So when should you do test prep? This is a question that my counselors are asked a lot, and I'm the head test prep coordinator at my school, so I'm asked a lot. And I don't mean this to be selfish, but I actually think math is the determining factor for when you do test prep, because mathematically, test. If you just finished geometry and you haven't taken Algebra 2 yet, I just think that. What do you think, Tom? Do you think you're ready for the test if you haven't even had Algebra 2?
No, especially in the updates that they've done since 2016. Algebra is such a big factor now that I think you're kind of wasting your time taking the test.
Yeah. So typically, I recommend towards the end of Algebra 2 or the summer after Algebra 2 is completed is like a great time to really start getting focused on test prep. You've got your base of algebra. At least you have a semester of Algebra 2. Under that, you have a good base of algebra, and so it's a good time to start working. So if they haven't already, and that could be different times for different students, because, by the way, and someone just mentioned, it's possible your school reverses that. And so maybe you have Algebra 2 first and then geometry. If that's the case, if you're doing SAT, you might be able to get away with doing test prep then, because SAT, only 6% of it is geometry, whereas the ACT, maybe like a fourth or a third of it is geometry, so much more geometry on there. So in ACT, you might not be ready for it if you haven't had geometry yet and Algebra 2, whereas the SAT, you could get by with just Algebra 2. But it doesn't really matter. In other words, I actually teach all Algebra 2 students at our school. I have some freshmen, some sophomores, and some juniors. And we don't do a whole lot of test prep before Algebra 2 for math. We really kind of tends towards now. I don't know what you would do, honestly, if you're a senior in Algebra 2. I think that's kind of a tough situation because you would have to start prepping before Algebra 2 if that's the case. But even a junior in Algebra 2, I think you could hit test prep pretty hard in the summer and it'd be okay. I think it's a really good time to do test prep. What do you think, Tom, about when you should test prep them?
Yeah, I think it depends upon the Algebra 2. I think that's the key thing. The geometry one, that Algebra 2 then geometry. I still think that if you're taking geometry after Algebra 2, you could probably do it after Algebra 2 because they kind of have knocked down the geometry a little bit, and some of the geometry is from maybe 8th grade or middle school. But Algebra 2 seems to be the determining factor for the ACT, I think.
Yeah. So I recommend oftentimes for students, take the ACT and the SAT following Algebra 2. And I don't care if they just do that. Maybe take one of the free tests that are available or some of the practice tests. They don't have to pay and take those. But I think it's not a bad idea to get a score of some kind, whether it be a practice test or the real thing, and compare those scores. And I don't know, some people don't realize this, but there are conversion score out there that you can actually compare your ACT and SAT and figure out which one you do better on. And so here's the scale here. And so 800 is perfect in SAT, and the ACT is 36. 30 is a big score for a lot of ACT students, whereas that's equivalent to a 700. 25, which is definitely above average there, is equivalent to a 600. Average is right around here. So average score for the ACT is 21. So that means the average is around 530, somewhere usually in the low 500s for the SAT. And then you're getting over here a little bit below average at 518, and then as you go lower and lower there. So that's just, it's not a bad idea to take both, and then, see which one you might lean towards. Like, for example, my son Josh was just a senior, and so he ended up taking both. And he actually, for him, time was a big factor for him, and so he actually preferred the SAT. He felt like the questions were maybe harder, but he had more time for them. In math, it's about a minute 20 per question, a minute 20 seconds, whereas on the ACT, it's a minute per question. And so it might be a timing issue, it might be the type of question. If you had to summarize ACT and SAT, how would you summarize the differences in math, Tom? Because we've looked at both of them pretty heavily.
I think the SAT asks questions much more. They both ask questions differently. They both ask the things that we assess, but ask them very differently. And I think SAT takes that to a different level on that. About 70% of the math is about the same, but the way they ask the questions are very different. Like, for example, matrices is done on the ACT. Nothing about matrices on SAT. So there's, some gaps there.
Yeah, the ACT covers a broader range of topics, whereas the SAT covers algebra, maybe a little bit more intense, but not as many topics.
I
there.
agree. Yeah.
I
we should point out, Jeff, before we go too far, both of our PowerPoint slides will be available online afterwards. We have a website that has links to several things that we'll be referring to.
That's
so
great.
If you're worried about this conversion chart or whatever, they're all available to you.
Great. I think it's a great idea to challenge your students to take a practice test, ACT test, over the summer break after Algebra 2. And this is, to me, it's kind of like assigning homework. I don't know, Tom, if you did this. If you assign homework, if a kid just does homework and he doesn't check the answers, it's not always that helpful. Did you make them check their answers when you assigned homework, Tom?
Not only that, in the day, I used to have them say, if we went over the homework problems and I collected them next day and they didn't correct them, they didn't get credit for their homework, because that was part of the deal. You did your homework, but you had to follow through and make corrections on it, because that was where the learning took place. So, I was kind of very strict about that.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're going to have a practice test over the summer, don't just take the test, but fix all of your errors. And so that's tough to do without any teachers around. There's a couple of things that might help. A lot of the books, if you get some of the big, thick ACT books, they'll have answer explanations for you in writing, which is very nice. There's a website called Quantum Prep we have a link to, and Tom's will show you that link in just a few minutes. But there's 3 free ACT video explanations. So what I mean by that is they actually work out every single problem worked out on video for 3 different tests. And so the ones they always pick are the most recent ACT, which in this case is April, the most recent preparing for the ACT, which is the 2018-19 PDF, which is actually the April 2017 test. And then if you have one of the ACT official ACT guidebooks, the first test in there, they have a video for those too. So I like using one of those tests if you want to give them the access to a video. Sometimes students prefer a video rather than just explanation on paper, and so they might prefer that. And there's some other resources we can talk about in a minute here. Also online on education.ti.com, there's some nice resources. So if you click to the resources tab and click to exam resources, you have some details about calculators. So it has it actually says which calculators are allowed. The big thing you need to know for ACT is the CAS, TI-Nspire, is not allowed on the ACT, either version of the CAS or the 89. Same thing on the International Baccalaureate. So the CAS versions, anything with a CAS functionality is not allowed on the International Baccalaureate or ACT. Interestingly, the PSAT and SAT allow the CAS calculator. So that is allowed. And so on the website, there's some tips and tricks. So there's some videos there that explain on TI-Nspire how to do some of those things. There's also some videos on TI-84 for test prep, some of the graphing things, equations, expressions. So that's available on the website as well. But wait, and Tom, don't you feel like we're in an infomercial right now? But wait, there's more. But if you copy this down, I would copy this down, or of course, you have the webinar. You could do the archive webinar, look it up. But this has all the links. Tom has organized all the links we've been talking about and put them in one spot, so you can get the PowerPoints. You can get all those links on that website. So if you want to get to that, that would be a good idea. Other ways to integrate ACT, I think as a teacher, one of the things I think about is as the summer comes up, you think, okay, close out the year, but you're thinking already about next year if you're a teacher. And so the thing I want you to think about as a teacher is what could you do next year in your own classroom to incorporate ACT more? So is there some small things you could do? So I don't know what you call it. I call it bell work. Do you call that an opening problem, Tom? Like you open class with like an ACT problem? What do you call that?
That's a good place to do it. Yeah, you could have that. I think assigning one a day would be a good idea. And I'd go back as far as like 8th grade algebra. Just get them used to start seeing questions like that because they ask them so differently.
So what you're saying is don't just have the questions that are related to the topic you're teaching on, but like Joshua said, ACT problem of the day, just, whatever problem happens to come up, talk about it because they sometimes don't review some of those topics. They haven't seen some of those topics. Like least common multiple, you'd think that'd be easy. Sometimes my students in Algebra 2, if I say, what's the least common multiple of 4 and 6, they say 2, which is the greatest common factor. Yeah. They just forget how to do least common multiple. It's been a while since they've done some of that. So I agree, vary it up a little bit, but maybe, include some on a quiz or a test, some kind of assessment, or maybe for extra credit. You might have some kind of ACT assignment or problems they can do for extra credit. Anything else? Any other ideas in the chat window there that y'all have that you could do to encourage ACT in your classroom next year or incorporate it more? Just wonder if y'all have ideas about that.
So while we're waiting for that, as Jeff said, it would be nice if you could have ACT problems that correlated right with what you're teaching. That would be a nice thing, but not necessarily. This is a great way to spiral back and review something you haven't done for a while or whatever. But I would highly encourage taking one of your problems, replacing one of your homework problems every day with an ACT problem, because that exposure just takes them to another level.
Yeah. So maybe, so Lisa said maybe include a bonus question on homework, and Michael included the bit.ly in the chat window there. Interestingly, so Shannon says that they have a 9-week class for students that can take. So a lot of schools are doing these kinds of, they can actually sign up, take a class or a 9-week class. I don't know if you get credit for that or not, but you could put those, again, into some kind of assessments or homework. It's a great idea to start, including that. So, and then Joshua said, teach a lesson, and at the end, show how the topics, show up on ACT. In other words, like, here's what the topic, we just taught matrices, here's what an ACT matrix question looks like. So kind of like put feet to the what you've been learning and say, hey, this is what it's going to look like. And so sometimes you relate them to the current topics is what Jennifer does there. I like that, including those on assessment. Another option is TIPD. So I don't know if you've seen the website. I wanted to show you this in case you hadn't. So on education.ti.com, if you go to, let's see, professional development and go to summer workshops, sometimes there's lots of different summer workshops, but if you look at the schedule here, you can see, like if I bet I could highlight this, ACT, let's see if it highlights. So there you go, ACT. Look at how many of these summer workshops around the country are on ACT here. So, I mean, lots of one-day workshops, it looks like, are ACT. We don't have any SAT offerings yet. We're piloting SAT this summer. We're in the process of finishing writing that right now. And so maybe next summer there'll be some SAT things. I just wanted to mention that if you are interested in doing more on the ACT and are, nearby to some of these, different workshops around the country, you might want to consider one of those because they've been very well received.
And also, while we're at that, one of the things that is supplied in that ACT PD prep is you're talking about trying to find problems to go with it. Well, Jeff, you can probably explain it better than I can about how you can just go ahead and search for a particular topic, what Pat Flynn did.
Oh, you're talking about if you go to the workshop and you get the materials, we've broken down the ACT by topic, and so you actually have a topical list. You can it's hyperlinked, and you can click to, you teach in matrices, it'll bring up all the matrices problems from the last, however many years of ACT tests. So we provide a lot of resources if you do some of those workshops with us. So we spend a lot of time on that. Any other ideas before we get down to the nitty-gritty? We're about to bring out the 84 and Inspire. Just wondering, as you prepare your students for the summer, what assignments, do any of you give assignments to your students for test prep? Do you tell them to, take ACT practice? I'm just curious what you all do, because oftentimes I sometimes think we can learn from each other. I'm just curious if any of you do any kind of summer assignments. I know, like with our, we have like a website portal kind of thing. We can actually do online. We do problems. So like we can make our one of our summer assignments, kind of like kids have summer reading for English class. We have summer work for pre-calculus, and so one of that is you have to take and practice ACT, and so we have enter their answers online. And we kind of analyze it. And so anything you can do to encourage students to do some kind of test prep over the summer, whether it be requiring a test, and having them put their answers in online, I think those are things that Michelle has done summer work, but not for the ACT, SAT. And I think that's something to consider is there some way to incorporate ACT prep or SAT prep into your summer work that you might require already. So they do have test prep built in their school day for juniors and seniors for months up until the ACT. That's also really nice. If you can in your school day, a couple final notes though is we really like to time it. In other words, students, sometimes students procrastinate. Tom, I don't know if you've ever had that with your students, but they kind of get closer. They get closer to the ACT and they think, oh man, I should be prepping for the ACT. And so if you offer classes that are timed close to that, I know one of our guys who writes the curriculum with us, Pat, at his school, he offers like a little after school, like the week before the ACT, they actually do an after school class for the ACT at his school. So, the week or two before the test, those 2 weeks before, a couple weeks before is a great time to just kind of say they're really, highly engaged and going, wow, I really need to do some of that test prep because they're about to take it. Never too early, says Justin. That's true. I mean, you're not going to hurt yourself by doing it too early. I had a kid, he was from Korea, and his parents made him do 2 hours of test prep every night of his high school career from 8th grade on. He did 2 hours of ACT test prep all through high school. So, and he was a very good math student. He got a perfect score on the ACT. It was no surprise because, I mean, he spent 2 hours a night studying for the ACT. So that's probably a little extreme. I don't know if your goal in life is to get a perfect score, but if you put enough time in, I think that's the idea here is if you get students thinking, okay, the more time you put in, the better you're going to do, and the more money and you get for scholarships and better schools you could potentially get into. Tom, what do you think? I might pass the ball over to you.
Okay, sure.
And we can get started with, get down to the ACT and SAT, the TI-Nspire and TI-Nspire material here.
All right, so
yeah.
You see it okay? Is that PowerPoint showing up all right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so I'll go ahead and start from here. So, I wanted to focus on some different things, not too many, but some using technology, some not using technology. Oh, before I do go on, I do want to say, Jeff, nice job on what you did there. So I just wanted to give you a Pez.
I appreciate it.
There you go. So want to make sure I realize I appreciate what you did.
Well,
right, so,
I appreciate that it's not a Ohio State Pez, because that would have been like, kind of a diss. I appreciate that it was actually a real Pez there. So.
Well, Jeff, you weren't that good. So Jeff's from Michigan, so we'll just let that go. All right, so how to prepare your students with and without technology, okay? And on the algebra things, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. And remember, the PowerPoints are there. If I'm going too fast, say, oh, geez, you went too fast. The PowerPoints are there. You'll be able to go back through and look at those, or you can look at the videos or whatever. I want to really kind of slow down when we do the technology. So, so the standard, I look at 5 types of sample ACT questions dealing with linear systems. And one is the standard. It says, what's the ordered pair that solves this system? And there are many, many ways you could, of course, do this problem. And so we're going to look both with and without technology to solve systems. So to do this, we're going to look at a system that's a little bit nastier than you would normally see on the ACT, just to kind of prove some points here. So you can see this is not a nice one at all. This would not be a good one. But we're going to solve this system by hand several different ways, using 84, using the Nspire and the new TI-Nspire CX2 technology. And so you can compare and contrast, because I know we have some people out there who are firm 84 users and firm Nspire users, and like you just see the differences and similarities between them. So to solve this, right, I'm going to pause this for a minute. Think of all the different ways you could to solve not only this system, but any system. So just think about them for a few seconds. I'd have you discuss among yourselves, but you're kind of far away from each other.
So Justin says matrices.
Okay, and that has several different underlying things. There's, not just matrices, but several things from that.
Tamara says elimination.
Okay.
Margot says graphing. Justin McLean, row reduced echelon form.
Okay. And he said it's possible. Remember, on the ACT, it's all possible. You're allowed to use your graphing calculator the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got some good things here. I'll just kind of zip through my thing here. The substitution method, and you guys are still putting up some other ones, which is great. So substitution.
Yeah, Michael Dorsey said system solver, linear system solver on Nspire.
Yep, we're going to look at that too. Good thing. So elimination, some people call it linear combination. Some people call it addition method or multiplication. Graph, I saw some people say graphically. Solving by table is a really good thing to do. And then somebody did bring up matrices, and we do have inverse of a matrix. We've got row reduced echelon form. We got Kramer's rule with determinants, which I'd say is kind of outdated, but possible. And then the graphing calculator technology, we could kind of go ahead and look at those things as well. So substitution, again, I'm going to go through this just to show the algebra. Hopefully it's correct. But what we would do is you would start with one equation and then solve for one variable. So I solved for x, and since they were such nasty things, I made it a single fraction. And then substituting into the other equation, you have to kind of distribute, or in this case, I multiplied by 6 first, I guess, to clear out the fraction. Distribute, collect terms, and so on. And when you solve this, you get y equals 4, okay? And then substituting back to get x, you get -3/2. So Jeff, what's that?
I really like showing this. I like having students do this. So like if I did this problem in my class, I might say, try solving this with substitution, knowing that there's going to be a lot of fractions. It's not going to be really easy to do. Because I want them to see, well, maybe there's an easier way. Then this might not be the easiest way, even though it might be their go-to way. It might be substitution.
Right.
Yeah.
Some may say that's the only one I know or whatever, okay? And so,
Right.
I do think it's a good idea for them to see this, to experience, so they can see the other ways that might be better. And keep in mind, as Jeff mentioned before, these are timed, about a minute a problem. So that's a good chunk of time right there and a lot of chance for error.
Yeah.
So we said elimination, linear combination. Again, you could multiply the top one by 5, the bottom one by 7, and when you add them, the y terms add to 0, and you get x equals -3/2. And of course, some students would stop and say, I must have made a mistake. What's doing a fraction doing here? Going back, y equals 4, and you get the same answer, okay? I think graphing is a great way to do this. I just worked with 27 students today all day on preparing for SAT. We field testing some of the items that Jeff and I have been working on for the last year. And we did do these graphically so that they could visualize the solutions. So let me go ahead and go off here and find an 84 somewhere. And I'm going to use the SmartPad app so I can run this. And so when I press the calculator, I run it. So for this one here, I would have to solve for y for those two equations. And when I do that, if you trust my algebra, I got y to be equal to that first expression. And notice, this was another strategy that I told the students. Why would I want to write that as 13/7 minus 10/7 x when I could make a mistake with something? Why don't I just leave it like that? Go ahead and graph it. So,
and it's pretty neat. You can use the fraction template in the y equals. That's pretty neat.
So let me go back and show people in case they haven't seen that. So I'll go ahead and put the second one in here. Two places to get the fraction template on the 84 now. On the color, alpha y equals, the F1 button. You can see the fraction template right there. But if you've upgraded your color one in the last few months, you can also press alpha followed by X button, the X T theta N button. It's kind of a Easter egg type thing. So again, that would be, great, I didn't write it down, 6x plus 29, I think it was, all over 5, if I'm not mistaken, there. And so I'm going to go ahead and graph this, and I'm using, this is my favorite window right now because it's a square window and it shows a lot of cool things, and I have the grid on. But you can see they intersect, and then of course you can use the second trace rather, to calculate the point of intersection. And
second trace
curve, second curve, yes. And then the guess, since there's only one point, you can guess any number and it'll be okay. And I'll press this, and I'm getting the answers -1.5 and 4 like we did before. And if you want fraction, by the way, some things that people don't remember is if I go off to the home screen, those values are stored in x and y. So if I press x, there's the x value, and I press alpha 1, there's the y value. And in fact, if I wanted the x value to convert to a fraction, I could just go ahead and say alpha y equals, and say convert it to a decimal or convert it to a fraction, whichever one it is. So kind of a cool feature there on the calculator. So there's
that's really neat, because sometimes those intersection points are not as friendly as that. That could be really helpful.
Right, exactly. So if you, like the one I did today with the kids, I think the fractions were like -271 and 56/71. And so, the decimals looked awful, but the fractions, well, they look just as awful too, but a little bit better. All right, so we've got graph. Another way to do this would be to go by table, okay? So if I go to second window, and by the way, I have these, my solutions are also in the PowerPoint. So again, if I'm going too fast or if you want to review it, it'll be in the PowerPoint. So if I go to a second window, which is table set, I'll start the table at say 0, and I'll do a delta table of 1, and I'll leave both of these on automatic. And so when I press second graph, notice I'm starting at 0 and going through. And unfortunately, I can't see the point of intersection because the point of intersection is at -3/2, and I don't have that. So I can go back to change the table settings. But another thing that's been there for the last few years and a lot of people don't realize is right here, you don't have to leave the table to change the table settings. It says right up here, press the plus sign to change the delta table. And so if I want that to be a fraction, I can just go ahead and type in, again, alpha xt theta n and 1/2. So this is a really nice feature. Teachers had said, students go to table set, they can't find the table again, and here you're still in the table, and you can see there it is. When next
that's neat.
Half by 4. Okay. Another one is graph table. Another feature that a lot of
Tom, can you try something? I just want to see something. I'm
Sure.
just curious. Can you do the table set again, and this time change it to 0.5 instead of 1/2? Can you type in 0.5
sure.
and just see how the table looks?
Yep. So if I go with 0.5 and go back to the table.
Oh, wow. That's a totally different look.
Yeah. So if you see, I still get the 4s, but I don't get these numbers, like as fractions as I had before. So good point there, Jeff. Again, glad you brought that up. Okay. So, and also if I go back to table settings, if I go down to here and if I type this 1 divided by 2, I forget what happens here. Does it?
I don't know.
Fraction? No. 1 divided by 2 is not the same as the fraction 1/2. 1 divided by 2 is done the calculation and get 0.5. So glad you pointed that out. The other is graph table. If you go to mode, this has been around for a long time. On the non-calculator one, it's GT and not graph table. But now, if I go back to table set, I'll go back to table set and start at 0, and I'll have a delta table, let's say, of just 1. Okay. And now when I'm going to press second graph, which is table. So now what I have here is I have the table on one side, the graph on the other. And as I press the right arrow, the up and down arrow, it travels along the graph and you can see the ordered pair. And if I press the left, if I go to the other direction and go to the red, I can go along the red one as well. So here's where you can kind of see the point of intersection and see the graph and see the table and so on. So
and you can change the table setting right in there, the same thing. It still gives you that table hint at the top of the page. Press plus for change the table set. So that's very handy.
And then start to see at -3/2, this is the place where the blue is 4 and the red is 4.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to turn that off because as much as I like it, when I don't want it, I don't like it. So I'll go back to full. And let me just go back to the PowerPoint and show you what we've done so far. So this is what I did. This was we did the linear.
So I thought just before, Cindy said a good point. She was working with her daughter and said her daughter was like, oh, I only want to know one way to do something. And then at the end but she kept showing her different ways. And the class, she was amazed that she understood better when she understood all the different ways to solve it. She understood the problem better. Don't you think that's important, like this, for students to see different ways to solve a problem?
Yes, Cindy. So virtual PES goes out to Cindy. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I used to have students who would tell me, oh, if you show me more than one way, you'll confuse me. And in when I first started teaching many, many years ago, I kind of bought into it for about a week. And then I realized, no, you got to see it because there's always going to be a way to say, oh, I didn't think of that. That's faster. It makes more sense. It's, whatever. So, no, I definitely want them to stay with that. So, So good point, Cindy. All right, so this was the, excuse me. So using the graph, I typed it into y equals, I graphed it, found the point of intersection, and showed you guys how you could convert it to fractions, the decimals to fractions. The table feature, we did started the table at 0, delta table of 1, didn't help a whole lot, so we used the plus sign to change the delta table to a half, and then we're able to find the point of intersection. And then the one we just did was graph table in mode, and you can see it on both the red and the blue, okay, and see that they're there. So just wanted to show you that that's there in case I went too fast, because I sometimes do. So now let's go ahead and look at the same thing on the Nspire, and I'm going to be using the pretty much brand spanking new TI-Nspire CX2, which I'm excited about. And also, what's nice about this is I'm going to use the feature called Live Presenter. And if you have the TI-Nspire software, you can upgrade to this for free. And you can now do Live Presenter, which is kind of like Smart View, except now on using Nspire. And it used to be to have the Navigator system to do this. No longer is that the case. So now I've got my calculator.
Let me just clarify. So what you're saying right now is you're not touching your computer. You actually have a handheld, a TI-Nspire CX2 in your hand that's controlling this?
Right. Whatever on my handheld is being displayed on the screen right now. And I'm connected to my computer via that black cable into a USB.
Yeah. I got it. That's nice. Sometimes it's easier it's actually faster to type on the keyboard on a calculator than it is on the software, I think.
Oh yeah, on the software, or even as much as I'm a big fan of smart boards, I like this idea of hooking this up because I can look at the students instead of turning my back on them, or give this to a student and let that student run the calculator while I'm, teaching. So, so anyway, I'm on the calculator right now, and I'm going to go ahead and type in those two equations. Now, if I was doing this on the 84, I'd have to solve for y, but on the Nspire, the Nspire users know you don't have to do that, and there's two ways around that. One is I can press tab and say, okay, I want to type in this, but I'm not going to use the function. Watch what happens when I press the delete button. I can delete the equal sign, and it says, oh, you must want to do either inequalities or some kind of a relation, which is what I want to do. I want to use the relation grapher. So I'm going to say, yeah, give me the relation. And now I can just type in the equation as we saw it, which was 10x plus 7y equals 13. Press enter.
Equals. You didn't type in equals.
Yeah, good. Oh, I didn't do the equals. Thank you. Good catch. So equals, was it 13? There it is. And then again, when I go to tab, it's ready for another relation. So I'll go with the 6x minus 5y equals, I think it was 29. Or was it, I'm sorry, it was negative 29. So in fact, I wanted to show you how you could edit it. So.
Nice.
Negative 29. And is not it? Not do it. That's weird. It's not letting me change it.
Oh, that's very strange.
Yeah.
Delete it.
Let me go ahead and select that and delete it. Let me try another one. Let me try it again. I'm going to have to ask somebody about that. 6x minus 5y equals a negative 29. And now it's graphing it properly. Okay.
There you go.
And I could go ahead and find the point of intersection here. And I will point this out. I find my points of intersection a little bit differently than other people. And so Nspire users, instead of going ahead and doing analyze graph, I like to use geometry. And I'll explain why. And under geometry, there's points and lines. And there's intersection points, which is now number 4 instead of number 3 because we've added another feature. And so here, when I go here, it's the same thing. You click on one, you click on the other, and as you do it, there's that point of intersection, -1.5, 4. But the reason I like this is if there was like more than one point of intersection, it would show me all of them. When I do the analyze graph, it'll only give me the one that I'm closest to. So
Yeah.
Another added feature if you want to consider, especially if I'm doing a trig graph. I want to find like 8 solutions. It'll show all 8 solutions.
Yeah.
So
I like geometry also for that. My students tend to use analyze graph, but I prefer the geometry.
Yeah. So we agree on something finally. Okay. So I showed you one way. The other way to get to relation is if you go to menu and go to graph entry edit, relation grapher is the second one. So it'll take you to relation. So you've got that option, or you could erase the equal sign and use the relation grapher. But again, I like that because you don't have to solve for y. So we're good there.
Yeah.
While we're here, I'm really a big fan of the new TI-Nspire CX2. So I just want to show a couple of features that are on there real quickly. For example, if you look at the degrees to radians, we used to have to go through such an ordeal to get it. Now, if you just point to it on the screen and click on it, it automatically changes to the other one. So,
ooh, that's nice.
And I think this is going to be available on the upgrade to the old Nspire CX through the software. I don't think it's just on the new CX2. So you have that one. Another feature I really like is the second one. If you have a line grid in the document settings, it remains live through that document and all future documents. So, for example, here, this is on this page. If I would add another graphs page, I don't have to go ahead and add the line grid again. It's there until I turn it off. And that's, if you like it, that's great. And so we'll take that if we've got it. Other things that are on it, the cool tick mark labels. I did this ahead of time just to kind of show this. So you can have now pi/2, pi/3, pi/2 showing up on there, which is very nice for the trig people. And the last thing I have is the new live presenter without navigator, which I'm using right now. So there's a lot of other features, and I have a link on our website that shows how to find them. So with that, let me go back to problems at hand. And so these were the new features. The second thing on the ACT is sometimes they'll just say solve for one variable. So they say find the value of b in the equation below. And this is different because before they would say what's the ordered pair. Why is it asked this way? Well, most of you probably figure out if I give you the ordered pair, even if you don't know how to do it, you can go back and substitute until you find the one that works. May not be the best way, but it's a way. Here on this one, if I find b, plugging in b doesn't help at all to find the answer to this question. And so the mantra that we kind of give is if you're asked to solve for one variable, eliminate the other one. So for example, on this one, we want to find b, let's eliminate a. And so many students would say, I'm going to multiply by -3, and that way this will drop out. Well, yeah, but then you find a, then you have to go back and find b, more time, more chance for error. Unless it's, a lot easier to go the other way, we suggest that mantra there. So if you solve this using whatever method, a turns out to be -2, and that's the answer for F, okay? A third thing that pops up, again without a graphing calculator, it will say find the sum of the solutions. So if that's the case, what you might want to do is you'll solve the system, and then you have to, when you solve the system, sometimes Jeff pointed out this is one of his strategies, is you fall from halfway answers. So some students will say, oh, -2, there it is, I got it. There's y equals 4, oh, there I got it. What are the chances? Well, chances are really good. You forgot to add them, and that answer is B. Okay, so sometimes they'll have you do that. Why would they have you do that? Sometimes they'll have you subtract. Sometimes they'll say take the ratio. But why ask this way? Again, it's one of those things you have to solve the system and then do something else. And it's just making the problem a little bit maybe more difficult, paying attention to the directions, whatever.
You know what I had this week, Tom? One of my students. I mean, it's so funny what can throw a student off, but just it had A's and B's instead of X's and Y's, and they were like, "How do I solve this thing?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a system, but it just had A's and B's, and that alone was enough to throw off the student.
Yeah,
so it's amazing, you know, just little tweaks.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to point, because I started when I ran into kids doing that, I stopped using X's all the time. I started using other variables just to get them used to that. So good point. Good point. Words to symbols is another thing that really graphing calculators don't come into play, but I just want to show you that this is the type of thing they have on the ACT, a word problem here. And so you have to, you know, assign variables to what you're looking for, take the words, translate them into symbols, take the next set of phrase and, you know, make that into symbols, and then solve the system. Okay, so now, again, we want to find C, so we want to eliminate F, you know, so that we don't have to do extra work here. So here again, the idea was to set it up and solve it. But the last part, this is the part that I really want to focus in on the time that's remaining, and that I call these clever word problems. And this is number 56 from I forget what test, but it says a wallet was found with $180 in it, consisting of $5, $10, and $20 bills. One more 10 than twice the number of 20s. Number $5 was 2 less than 4 times the number of $20 bills. How many $5 bills was in the wallet? So this is now 3 variables and probably 3 equations, and that's out there. Okay, so I'm going to go with F, E, and W, and F for the number of 5s. I didn't want to go with T for the number of 10s because we had 20s as well. So I went with the second letter in them, E for 10s and W for 20s. And then I had to translate those things into equations, okay? And that third one is not the obvious one, okay? Not all students would get that 180 in it. Sometimes they'll get these two and say, where's the other equation, okay? And I solved this by substitution. Again, W equals 3. Notice I have a wrong answer because I found W. You were asked for F, which was 10, okay, which is the letter K. Now, as far as technology goes, our graphing calculators will solve these. Both the 84 and the Nspire will solve systems of 3x3s, okay? I'm going to stay away from matrices for tonight, though I like row-reduced echelon form. So I'm going to go ahead and solve this using the TI-84 family. And what I do have to do is I have to put this in standard form, and I can't use F, T, and W. I have to use X, Y, and Z because that's the way it's set up. So what I'm going to do is going to go ahead and put this into something called, using the application called Poly-Simultaneous 2 application. And so if you're not familiar with this, get familiar with it. And I've had some people say, oh, this is cheating because it's doing it for you. ACT knows it's on there. This is a high stakes test. We're allowed to use it. Let's use it. So, and in my classroom, this would be a by hand question, but on the ACT, definitely okay to use it here. So,
or even just on a 2x2, you could use this if you wanted to, right?
If you want to just break it down to a 2x2, you could do, yes, you could use it as 2x2. So I'm going to go ahead and press apps, go down to Poly-Simultaneous 2, and I'm going to use number 2, simultaneous equation solver. 2 equations, 2 unknowns. Okay, that's what I want. The next is above the graph key, so I'll press graph to go to the next one. And so I'm going to type in, I had 3x3, huh? Let me go back, sorry. So let me go back to the main. So simultaneous, I want 3 equations with 3 variables, 3 unknowns, my fault there. And then I'll go to next. And so what was that system? So I think it was 0 and then plus, I think it was 1y minus a 2z, I think it was, and that was equal to 1. And 1x plus 0y's minus 4z's is equal to -2 when I put it in standard form. And then I had the 5x's plus the 10y's plus the 20z's is equal to $180. So there's my system of 3 equations, 3 unknowns. Solve is above the graph key, so I press graph, and there they are. The number of 5s is 10, 10s is 7, and the 20s is 3. So And also what you could do is if you want to go back to the system, press the zoom key. You can see the system, go back and solve it. If you want to store this into a matrix, you can. All kinds of cool things you can do with this. So this is, again, I think this is available also on the grayscale calculator. If I wanted to do the same thing on Nspire, I'll do that on Nspire. I'll go back and I'll find myself a place to go here with that. Let me go ahead and add a calculator page. And this is going to be under Menu and Algebra and Solve Systems. Now I'm on a CAS machine, but it's also on the regular non-CAS. Solve Systems of Linear Equations. And here's what's kind of cool is I can say I have 3 equations and then tab, but I can use the variables that I had before, which were F, E, and W. So I'm going to go ahead and type in E, comma, F, comma, and W and press enter. And now it's bringing up the linear solve. And I don't have to have the equations in standard form, so I can write them as I had before, like E equals 1 plus 2W was one of the equations. F was equal to 4W minus 2. And then we had the 5Fs plus the 10 E's plus the 20 W's was equal to 180. And now when I press enter, 7 for E, 10 for F, and 3 for W. So we've got that linear solve going there.
And Tom, can you go back to the question again just for a second?
Sure. There.
So one thing, this is not a technology way of solving it, but it just seems like something we've done a lot with test prep is working backwards would work really nicely here. As one of the participants mentioned, the answers are kind of sequential. They go from smallest to biggest. Mm-hmm. And so you could start with 8 and plug it in, say, well, what if there were 8 $5 bills, and kind of then figure out how many 10, how many 20, and see if that's the right answer or not. And sure. Then figure out, and kind of work backwards and just do it that way. I know it's a totally different way of doing it, but that's one of the things we've learned with test prep. There's many different ways to approach problems, and working backwards or plugging in answers is really big there.
Yeah, so Pez to that person. Yeah, that is another one of the strategies there. All right, so let me wrap this up because we're getting out of time here. I just want to show the last one. I'm not going to show it. I'll just show the slides, but I would like you to see it. So we did this one by hand. We did this with the 84 using the app. And then this one is using what we just did here. But this last problem here, I just want to show it and take a minute. The sum of the measures of angles, 2 angles is 80, another 2 angles is 140, another is 30. What's the sum of the measures of 2 other angles? And you could do this algebraically, okay? And I know this is kind of quick, but you can go back and look at it. If you add certain equations together and place QR with 30, you get P and S to add up to 190. So you can do it algebraically. You can also do it by substituting numbers, which is a great strategy Jeff taught me. Pick 2 numbers that add up to 30 and then find that P is 70, S is 120, they add up to 190. But if you use the technology, you can actually do this with simultaneous equations, saying there's 3 equations, 4 unknowns, and it comes up with an infinite number of solutions. But when you look at it, the P is 190 minus X4, the S is X4. When you add them up, you get 190. And then finally with Nspire, you can do it with the linear system also. One thing I do have to point out is it will only let you do 4 equations with 4 variables. So I had to cheat and put the same equation in twice, but it still came up with the same solutions. 190 minus a constant plus a constant equals 190. So just wanted to point that out there. Sorry, I kind of rushed through it, but I did want you to see that. So with that, Mike, I'll take that back to you. This is the website that has all the information, but when you go, there's all this information there. So Mike, back to you.
Thanks so much, Tom.
And there you go.
Thank you. So earlier, I think both Tom and Jeff had mentioned about some of the upcoming T-Cube summer workshops, and we are excited to have a lot of them running in the summer. We're also excited that tonight we're going to be giving away to one lucky winner a T-Cube Summer Workshop Conference registration, and our lucky winner tonight is Ann Martin. So Ann, congratulations. We hope to see you as well as everyone else at T-Cube's Summer Workshop, and we'll be following up over email in the next couple of days to give you a little more information. To receive a certificate of attendance, go and click the link in the chat window. Also listed is a link for the documents from tonight, different than what the link that Tom and Jeff had sent. So make sure you have their link as well for their documents. If you're watching this on demand, go ahead and copy that link into your favorite browser to receive your certificate. Thanks so much, Jeff and Tom, for everything you shared tonight. We really appreciate it.
No, it was fun.
Yeah, I guess they saved the best for last, right? The best last of the spring? I don't know. It was fun. Thanks.
No doubt. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll be back online in about 2 months. So come back and join us in mid to late July. Thanks so much. Have a great summer. Talk to you soon.